Hey lads and lasses, let's talk about lads and lasses today. We're going to be talking about love, about relationships, and about the future of love and relationships. All fun stuff, right? The talk is structured in four parts. Part one is the now, part two is the why, part three is where we discuss potential solutions, and part four is where we speculate about the tomorrow, about how the landscape might look like in the near future. So, let's start right in. Do we have a problem with relationships? I think we do. I think we've got a slew of problems. You look at the hyper-atomized nature of the population. You look at the way the social fabric has been unraveling over the past 2 decades, especially with excessive use of technology, where people are spending less time in the physical realm and less time in the meat suit realm and more time on the devices, taking us away from the most human of humanity, which is connecting with people. Then you've got the fact that short-term relationships have become the norm, which in and of itself isn't a problem. It's just indicative of something else. And what that something else is the fact that we don't have the patience, we don't have the attributes that allow us to work on something and truly make it great, right? Because great relationships, they take work. You might have the initial spark, but I'm sure that only a tiny percent of relationships can rely on that, because every couple will have that initial spark, but most couples break apart, right? It tells you that the successful ones, they work on it, like they'll work on anything else worth working on. Like a kid, right? Initially having a child is going to make your life miserable, but you still stick it out. People don't have the patience anymore. People don't have the patience to take out the inevitable challenges that are inherent in relationships. And also the way the technology landscape has moved, it has conditioned us to, and even the culture for that matter, it's conditioned us to just expect everything quick, easy, and perfect. And relationships, they tend to require the exact opposite of it, right? Because sometimes it's hard work, it's real hard work. And it's going to take a long time to get to the peak of a relationship. And if, for whatever reason, you think that your peak was in the first few weeks, then that's not a relationship worth striving for, and that's the point at which a lot of people get stuck. So that's become a very common occurrence. And we've got the fact that a lot of people are becoming solipsistic, are becoming entitled, are becoming narcissistic, which again has a detrimental effect on the quality of relationships. And also this lack of patience and this always available quality of modern world means that people don't want to stick it out. People don't want to stay committed because there's always something better on the horizon, and people have got this very strong sense of FOMO. Our ancestors, they would never have had that even 100 years back. Forget about ancestors far back into time, but even 50 years back, right? Because you knew a few people. It's not like you had access to the entire possible potential dating pool of New York City. So you had to put up, and because you didn't have a choice, you would strive and you would work hard to make it work, which not a lot of people do in the world today. Then we've got the fact that people are objectified so much. The objectification of humans has been propagated by pornography, where people are looked upon as objects of sexual pleasure. And again, that has to have a severely detrimental effect on the quality of relationships. Then we've got the fact that dating apps, they commodify human beings. So there's an objectification part of it, and there's a commodification part of it, where dating apps, they put humans, put people into these boxes, and where people's attributes need to be drilled down and distilled down, rather than looking at their humanity, at their essence of things that can't be put into words, or can be, but that require more effort, which people don't want to expend. Then there's the lack of total spaces. Again, this goes back to how cultures, how societies have been structured in the past 50 years, where back in the day, you could meet people in all sorts of new places, you could go to communal events, stuff like that, right? In the modern world, it's becoming exceedingly more difficult to meet people organically. Then you've got the paradox of connection, where the more connected we are, the less connected we are. The way this has happened is that the more number of connections, the higher the number of connections, the more connections we have, the less the quality of connections. And this goes to speak of something called the Dunbar's number, which I think if he was a sociologist or an anthropologist, who determined that the optimal number, the maximum number rather, the optimal probably would be way less than that, but the maximum number of quality, and quality obviously needs to cross the threshold, the maximum number of quality relationships that you can have is 150. And that's because you've got a limited brain size. You can't just increase it with an increasing number of connections, right? You have to work with the brain that we've got. And our brains, the size of the brains, and seeing how much, I'd say, neuronal space each relationship occupies, 150 is the number for humans. And there's the two spectrums, obviously, are people who've got a few relationships of the highest order, but they don't really know a lot of people. And then some people, especially that category of people, has been increasing, and you can see that based on the number of Facebook friends or Instagram friends that you might have. But you know so many people, but you might not have a great many quality relationships. The optimal state, based on my observations of humanity and well-being and happiness, seems to be much closer to having a few people that you've got a great relationship with, but also not just that, right? Because you can have the two extremes are 5 people of the highest caliber, highest quality, or 150 people of diluted quality. I wouldn't say that 5 people of the highest quality is the optimum. I think it would be somewhere like 5 people of the highest quality, and then maybe 10, 15 that you know, or whatever number that's very context dependent. So that's that. Then there's the fact that a lot of people in the modern world complaining that they're not complaining, but if you were to ask them, they don't complain because it's just become normalized. But if you were to ask them about the quality of relationships, or rather the quality of the friendships, a lot of them would say that they don't have a friend, they don't even have a close friend, let alone a best friend. That's become a very common thing, which again seems incredibly impossible, but it has become very normalized. Then there's the fact that a lot of people are choosing to live asocial lives, spending time in the mom's basement, playing video games, smoking, smoking weed, and yeah, in a way they're almost opted out of meeting new people or just being in a relationship, because when people make those choices, again, I'm not judging, I'm just saying that when people make those kinds of choices, it's in a way it's almost a signal that they're opting out of I wouldn't even call it the mating pool, but even the friendship pool. So that's, again, that number has been increasing. Then you got the fact that, related to this, the fact that we've got the pull of the artificial stimulants, right? But the quality of video games has been increasing like anything. The increase in quality has been exponential. If you go back to 1980s, which is when I come from, the quality was atrocious. And then you look at today, and the difference is night and day. And then you just extrapolate a few more years, especially because of the exponential nature of things. In a few decades, virtual reality will be completely indistinguishable from real reality. And when that becomes the case, people are going to find, especially when real reality is difficult in terms of people not having the social skills, people not having the life skills, people not having great happiness or success in real life, they might choose to spend more and more time as a form of escapism, but it might just become so normalized that it might not even be seen as escapism, it might just become the norm. So the world of Ready Player One, right? When the real world is so broken apart, so desolate, so bleak, that the only way you can find any semblance of happiness in that universe is by, well, immersing yourself in a virtual world of your own making, where you can make the perfect world, where the experience machine thought experiment, right? It's going to become the reality very soon, where people can just create their own perfect worlds, and a lot of people will be spending most of the times in those worlds, if not all the time. That's just, again, how the chess pieces are set. Then we've got the fact that, yeah, so we've got the loneliness epidemic, we've got the fertility crisis, which again goes back to the quality of relationships. People back in the day, they would just pop out kids if they didn't really have a high standard for popping out. I shouldn't say pop out kids. Oh, I shouldn't say that. People didn't have a high standard before they would decide to. They wouldn't even decide, it was just the done thing that, yeah, let's just have kids, let's just find someone with a suitable match, let's just have kids, right? But people have got high expectations. And that means that again, the number of kids have been on the especially in the modernized world, uh, has been on the decline at a precipitous rate, and a very concerning rate. And we've got the fact that the marriage statistics are on the rocks, right? People can't seem to stay hitched up or married. It's just, and this is after you consider the fact that most people do not actually get married. So it's become the minority, the number of people who get. I wouldn't say that's a majority or the minority. I'm not aware of those facts, but I'm sure that a sizable number of people who are in long-term relationships, they do not choose to marry because for all sorts of reasons, right? So a lot of people do not choose to marry, unlike back in those days, where most people would marry and most marriages would stay alive until the death of either of the partners, or both of them at the same time. Then we got the fact that one-parent households have been on the rise, and again, in and of itself, it doesn't seem to be concerning. But when you look at all the different life outcomes, there's a high correlation of having better life outcomes with very strong correlation with having a two-parent household. So again, that's not a good place for humanity to be in. So based on the last 11 minutes, what we can conclude is that the state of human relationships is not in a good place at all. Let's talk about, okay, so that's settled. It's not in a good place. But why do people have relationships, right? Why do even care about this? Why to care about this at all, right? So, multiple reasons. The main reason is obviously always the evolutionary reason. I wouldn't even call it conditioning. We've been hardwired by evolution to seek relationships because that's how evolution propagates our species, right? The biological imperative. Without that, well, we wouldn't be a species for too long. So we've been required by evolution. It literally wants us more than anything else to copulate and propagate. Then we've got the fact of societal conditioning, right? And societal things, they tend to come from evolutionary conditioning, not always as an offshoot of what Sigmund Freud called the sex instinct. It could be some other instincts. And I, for one, and obviously a lot of people still believe that, I, for one, wouldn't ever say that most of the major things come from the sex instinct. Humans are much more complex creatures than that. So the tapestry of human emotions is much deeper and much more complex than a mind like Sigmund Freud could have grasped. Right, so that's that. So that's the societal conditioning, right? Where we are expected to be coupled up. Again, to some degree this comes from it. You could argue to the entire degree this comes from the evolutionary desire to copulate and to couple up. And that comes from the fact that over the many millions of years, males and females had to come together to create an offspring. But the reason we stay together is over the last few million years, since our nearest ancestors, dead ancestors, evolution had to find a way because of, again, the dynamics, right? There are babies, the mothers, for example, they can't really exercise a lot, and they need protection, they need nourishment, they need a provider for that. So evolution had to create a mechanism. The mechanism was that the male figure would be the hunter-gatherer. Obviously, I mean, there's a lot of nuance to this, simplifying it. And the female would nourish the child. And because the human baby takes an insane amount of time to grow up, it would take the couple evolution had to invent a way of keeping the couple together. So that's how we got monogamy. And that's how we got coupling up, pair bonding. So that was that. Then we got the fact that intellectual companionship, right? One of the greatest joys of life is to be able to talk about Big Bang, about pulsars, about neutrons, about quarks, right? Or about things that happen in your life, about how you make sense of the world. That's one of the greatest pleasures in life. The existence of thoughts, right? Not just emotions, because love and everything else goes into the bracket of emotions. But the ability to have thoughts, complex thoughts, it's one of the greatest pleasures. And being able to engage and partake in that activity with someone, that's obviously one of the greatest things, one of the greatest blessings of being a human. So that's again a very compelling factor in us, a lot of us choosing romantic relationships. Then there's the fact that humans, the need for validation is extremely strong in humans, right? We want to be cared for when we are a kid. We want to be touched. We want to see the signals that we are being cared for. And that again, most of us are just little babies even as we grow up, right? We still want to be cared for. We still want to know that people care about us, that people would watch our back, that people have got our backs in whatever circumstances that may arise. And that's an extremely powerful pull factor for human beings. Then we got the sexual pleasure, right? Where it's for most humans, for a lot of, well, I think for most humans, it's been disconnected from the biological imperative, but you can't completely disconnect it because the pleasure one gets from intercourse is extremely potent. And evolution doesn't, you can fool evolution, right? You can still get the same hit without getting the outcome. So humans have invented a way to get the rewards, to have the cake and eat it too, for one time in their life history. So that's that. Then we've got the fact that again people seek the fear of dying alone, which goes back to the fact that people just want to be acknowledged. People want to feel a sense of belonging. People want to feel a sense of connection. That people got their backs right. We are very tribal creatures at heart, very social creatures. If back in the savannah days, if you're just cast out, you'd be as good as dead, and we don't like that feeling. Being cast out, being alone, it creates those emotions in us, because those emotions are very difficult to root out. And that's why loneliness, you would think that, okay, how can loneliness be as detrimental as smoking, I think, 9 packs of cigarettes. Okay, this is just I wouldn't call it a completely random number, but I haven't read the study in detail, but I'm sure that there's a lot of lever that they took to arrive at this number, right? 9 packs of cigarettes. So how would someone be able to say that loneliness is as bad as it? Because we are very social creatures, these things are extremely deeply ingrained in us. And if you were to cast out, it would feel, the pain of it would be tantamount to the pain of being on the verge of dying, which is how it must have felt to many of our ancestors who might have survived, and that's why we feel the kinds of emotions that they might have felt. So that's that. Then we got the fact that Hollywood, right, a media is not just a mere reflector, it's also an inducer and amplifier of things. And so our expectations of what romantic love is and how it should look like, a lot of them come down from media. A lot of this is built on top of the canvas that we got going. A lot of it just comes down from these kinds of things. And then we've got the fact that a lot of marriages back in the day, they used to be marriages of convenience and marriages of status, where marrying certain kinds of people would just get you a lot of status, give me a sec. Yeah, so back in the day, we're marrying into certain kinds of families or marrying certain kinds of people with positions of power that would get you status, which again is a very strong signal to the quality of life, the potential quality of life of your potential progeny. So that's that. Right, so that's the landscape, right? We crave relationships and love. That's established, and we've got a problem. That's established. Where does that take us? Before we talk about solutions, I just want to quickly talk about something I saw. I think this was a couple of months back. A thread on Twitter about this company called DigiAI, which was creating robotic, or rather AI companions, digital companions, romantic companions, as dystopian as it sounds, right? And that had a lot of people go gaga, go nuts, because of the very anti-human nature of it, because of the very concerning, very dystopian nature of it, which I get big time. So I want to talk about that real quick. I want you to go with me on a thought experiment. Let's say you are in a perfect relationship, right? And what I've done is replace your partner with someone who's the exact replica of that person. Exact. So when you interact with your partner, you don't really slice their brain to see where the response is coming from, right? You just hear the voice, or you just feel the smell, or smell the smell, or you just hear the noise, hear the voice, or you just, what else? All the different sensory attributes, right? uh, you don't really care about what's going on inside. The only point at which you do care about this is when you're trying to conceive, at which point only a biological being would be able to create a biological offspring. But beyond that and before that, you don't really care about the fact that your person, your favorite person, the person with whom you've got a perfect relationship, that they're in a meet suit. You don't care about that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm replacing that person without your knowledge. And I'm doing that, I've done that 5 years back. And you have been in a blissful relationship with your person for the last 5 years, completely oblivious to the facts. Then I knock on your door today, and I tell you the truth. The truth is that your partner is not your partner. The person that you think, that you thought was your partner, is enjoying a long vacation somewhere on Mars. And you can call her right now, or call him right now, to confirm that. The person that you've been thinking has been your perfect person is just an advanced robot, advanced AI, the most powerful, well, it's not the most powerful, an advanced AI that could have and that did replicate all your person's emotions, inflections, all the different things that make up your person, right? Memories, everything. How would you take that piece of information? How would you process that? My take, my instinct is that people wouldn't be as concerned as you might think, because, as I mentioned, people care more about the output, about what's happening on the surface. Not that we. So my point is that we don't really have an affinity to the fact that we are biological meat suits, right? And the fact that we can create attachments to non-human objects, be it animals, be it pets, be it objects like passions or houses or cars, things of that nature, that tells us that we can't just, we are not limited to forming deep relationships with humans, we can do that with other objects, right? And if that object is a non-human entity, but that can resemble a human perfectly, would that change things? I don't think so. So that's the thought experiment that I wanted you to chew upon as we delve into this discussion. The discussion being are AI robotic companions. So going forward, I'm just going to call them AI companions. Are AI companions a terrible thing? Are they the harbinger of doom? Or is the concern overblown, just like the concern about, I don't know, there have been moral panics throughout history, right? So is it just one of those moral panics, or is there something extremely insidious about what's about to happen? So let me just tell this to you. Based on how things are, this is about to happen, this is bound to happen. So my take is, personally I'm torn on this, I'm extremely torn on this, because I see the very anti-human nature of this, and I see the fact that human relationships and love is literally the best thing about being alive, right? Nothing even comes close. It gives life meaning. There are obviously other things which give life meaning, but human relationships and love, it's one of the best things in the human experience. And this kind of a technology would replace that for a lot of people. Now, it's not going to replace that for everyone. This is just, right, let's talk about why this even happened before we go any further. The why this happened is also the second part of the discussion, which actually reduced the concern I have, if I can put it that way, because I was extremely concerned, and you don't want to see these kinds of anti-human things, and a lot of an intent of things in culture that have been normalized are anti-human. I'd put guns into that category, I'd put drugs into that category, those certain kinds of drugs. I'd put pornography into that category, I'd put certain kinds of social platforms into that category, right? So why would something like this arise? Let's talk about that real quick. Right, the issue is that, as we mentioned a few, I think 10 minutes ago, humans, well, our standards collectively as a species of who our partners would be have been increasing, as they would and as they should. The more we expect of our partners, the harder standards they would have to rise to, and the harder standards they rise to collectively over a societal level, this increases the quality of people, right? The quality of interaction, the quality of relationships, which is what we want. So it's a great thing. What's happened is, again, even as our expectations have increased, the quality of potential mates on both sides, male and female, has been decreasing. But this AI girlfriend, AI relationships, AI companions has been more of a thing on the male side, as in catering to the male side. I'm going to focus on that. Women are hypergamous, which means that they tend to want to mate over or across their status. And what's happened is, over the past 2 decades, the quality of males has been decreasing substantially in terms of they earn less money, right? I'm not saying the quality of men from a word standpoint. I'm just talking about the quality of men as seen by women, right? So I'm going to be very clear about that. I'm not saying that the quality of humans has been decreasing, not at all, that's all. It might have come across that's my fault. Right, so the quality of men as seen by women in terms of the attributes that women care about, those being the amount of money someone makes, the education, the social capital, those things have been on decline, right? People have less number of friends, less number of strong relationships, they earn less money, less men are going to colleges than women, all sorts of things, right? So that means that more and more men, as a proportion, are becoming ineligible to date, and that just puts them in this zone where they're either going to die with the experience without experiencing the love and warmth that human relationships bring, or something like this comes along, which it has. So what is this, right? It's catering to those men who might never have been able to experience relations. This is obviously just an illusion, but over time you can imagine that the illusion might become as good as reality. And we can ignore that fact for a second as such. That for them, the illusion of love, and also look at it from this standpoint, right? That sure, it might be an illusion, but it's increasing the net amount of happiness, and if it's increasing the net amount of happiness, it's increasing the net amount of well-being in the world, which is what, as a society, we should care for, right? Is it the moral duty of a culture which cares about the well-being of its people, of its constituents, to not do everything in its power to increase that? And if that involves doing something along these lines, or allowing something like this, I'm a libertarian at heart. Not a complete libertarian, but to a large degree. And yeah, I find this concerning. But there have been discussions about maybe, I've read some of these discussions about maybe banning this. The question is that, would that be a good outcome for humanity? And is it morally right to do something like that? As I said, I'm torn on that. So in light of the state of things, should then a culture not have a moral duty to do its damnedest to increase the net amount of well-being and happiness? And if that takes the form of creating robotic companions that are full of love, kindness, joy, empathy, all the good things, intelligence, all the good things that a person wants in a partner, even if it's illusory, isn't that a good thing? That's a big question that societies will have to grapple with over the next few decades, as this becomes ever more real. Yeah, sure. So let's talk about the illusory part of it real quick, right? Just because it's illusory doesn't it make it bad. I'd say no to that. And I'd say no because if they didn't have that, or if they didn't have this, then they wouldn't have had anything else. So it's either some amount of happiness, not the optimal level, not the real thing, but some amount of happiness rather than none, right? So obviously some is better than none. Then there's the fact that we don't love our partners because they are the best people in the world. We don't love them because we don't love them unconditionally. We don't love them selflessly, right? We love them because evolution has ingrained in us this desire to love, to pair bonds, and to feel the set of emotions that we do. And that sounds very depressing on the level, right? Because, well, we don't have a free will to love our partners. I don't want to get into that discussion at the moment. That's a completely different discussion. The point is that when you say that they're choosing to love something illusory, that's got more credence if the love that most people, everyone else experiences, comes from their own volition. When it doesn't, right? As we mentioned, deeply ingrained to be in love and fall in love and experience relationships. And so, you can't conflate illusion with fakeness, with, well, compulsion, but to some degree you can, because it's like we almost have to be in relationships to feel the kinds of things that we do, which again probably could be seen as an argument for why these things should be there, should be allowed. Yeah, love is so powerful because it had to be like that. It had to be because the prime imperative of evolution is to make us pop up babies. And the way to do that for, again, a society as an organism as complex as ours is to put something which we label as love. Without that, it would have been pretty damn difficult. Well, if that hadn't been the case, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, because God knows what kind of a species that would have been. Because love is the most fundamental thing to the human experience, and without love, we wouldn't quite happy. I mean, now we're talking about something ridiculous counterfactual, so let's not go there. Right, so that's that. And then we talked about how the processing unit in the experiment, we saw that it's a processing unit that we care about. Or rather, it's the output that we care about rather than the processing units. We don't care about the fact that we don't really love our partner's spleen or their kidney or their brain, right? We care about and we love what comes out of them, and then we represent what comes out of them with the object that is them. But if the object is replaced while keeping everything else the same, it's very likely that nothing would change for a lot of people. A lot of people would still have a very pro-biology and pro-carbon bias, but a lot of people might just move beyond the carbon bias to a silicon bias. Or they might just become bias-free, right? Whatever works for them works. And I think that's likely to happen. And also, since the output of the robotic companion would be far greater, would have far more love, more kindness, more empathy, more intelligence, more joy, more beauty, more everything that you want in a partner, it would just make sense that a lot of people would be gravitating towards these objects. So based on this, and based on the fact that all the trend lines are pointing in a certain direction, even though I call this trend a very sad and pathetic trend, I see that this is just going to become the norm, as sad as it is. It is sad, because love is literally the best thing in the human experience, and when some people do not experience that, it shows that something's gone awry in our culture, which again is a separate discussion. And the fact is that as AIs become more moldable and more customizable, people can literally build who they want their partners to be, right? Which we cannot underestimate the potential of this particular trend, where people can literally design their person to be. Their person to be the way they want them to be, they'll speak the way they want them to be, look the way they want them to be. And just one example, you can have the kinds of conversations that you could never have had with a human. You can have the kind of intercourse that you could never have with a human. But the kind of frequency that you want. So obviously this is something which is going to become extremely lucrative as an industry. And when the industry becomes lucrative, some really smart people get into it and see how they can make money, which they do by making the product more captivating. And in this case, the product is human love, which is in of itself the most captivating product there is. The evolution is created. So that's that. And then there's the fact that as life becomes ever more easier, as things like UBI, universal healthcare, universal mental healthcare, robotic help, etc., take hold, people will need to rely on other people less and less, which again probably points to this trend becoming ever more prevalent. And then we got the fact that for emotional companionship and support, AIs are already in this very moment better than humans. Obviously, they don't understand things, but at least in terms of the output, in terms of what they say and how they make it. So some people feel, some people they'll always know back of their mind that I'm seeing with an AI, so they're never gonna get past that. The suspension of disbelief is not gonna kick in. For some people, it can and it has. That's why some people have, or you do have AI girlfriends, AI therapists, etc. But those kinds of people, or even forgetting those kinds of people, AI right now is able to be more empathic, is able to be more compassionate, more kind to people right now, right? And it doesn't judge you. And a lot of people feel judged, even in romantic relationships. But the one thing that you want more than anything else is not feel judged. A lot of people do feel judged. And that's why they do some of the things that they do. So again, AI is going to be, this is like another evidence pointing to the fact that AI companions are just going to take off like few of the things have in the past. So that's that. That is that. The harder question to ask that no one's asking is, how can we elevate people's consciousness such that they don't need these devices, these companions, right? Where they become capable of being good partners, great partners, and capable of building great relationships. Well, that's a very long discussion, so that's got to be for another time. Let's talk about the solution to the loneliness epidemic, to the crisis of quality relationships, to low quality mates, to the fracturing the social fabric. And yeah, the fact is that most people, they make all their friends before the college days, right? And then once past that, they're not going to make too many friends. And it's a bit ludicrous to expect people, especially as the circumstances change, for these friendships to, some people can be lucky and some friendships can be lifelong, but in the increasingly more volatile world, it becomes rarer and rarer. And yet people expect that friendships will stand the test of time, right? Some will, most won't. And so, one thing that people can do is to just become more open to meeting new people. Because we just become so closed up, we just become very close in our own silos. So that's one thing that we could do, and to give up the expectation that all your friends, all your relationships, you would have made them in your only close. Well, without relationships, because people still do go out and friends, and rather seek relationships. Well, with friends, that's something which doesn't happen, right? And people break up relationships because they'll diverge in different directions. They'll evolve to become different persons than they were at the start of the relationship. Why shouldn't this be expected of friendships, right? Which friendships are, again, some of the most beautiful parts of the human experience. And yet, people change drastically over a decade, and yet they keep the same, some of them keep the same friends, and hence the quality of the friendships decline, because you're not the same person that you were, and that person might not be the right fit for you, just as a romantic partner who you had 10 years ago probably isn't the right fit for you because you've grown a lot. So that dynamic, that expectation needs to be dispelled if people are to become more open to just building new relations, forging new friendships and relationships. The taboo of adult friendships needs to be dispelled if society is serious about fixing its loneliness epidemic, because it's mostly old people beyond the mid-20s who suffer from loneliness. Obviously, loads of young people do too, but for them, this artificial environment where they can meet new people, and a lot of people, they might have these mental conditions which might make them not feel a strong desire to socialize or to build friendships, but that's a separate category of people. Then there's the policy prescription of third spaces, right? Creating spaces where people can just meet, just spend some good time, meet new people organically, so that could be something really useful. There are kinds of tools and technologies to find all kinds of people. The fact that we can find, Amazon helps us find a product with the kind of pinpointed accuracy that would have been inconceivable 5 years ago, and the fact that we don't have a tool like that for friends or for relationships. Side note, I'm actually building something along those lines. The fact that we don't have that is a travesty, right? Because technology should empower us to live our best lives rather than to just do the exact opposite, which a lot of it has done. So if we can use technology to find the, because imagine this, right? You're a certain kind of person with a certain set of attributes, interests, personality, traits, etc. And it is extremely unlikely that your kind of people, that even one of your kinds of people would have been in your vicinity, because the world is a wide, big, big 8.2 billion people world. So that's pretty big. And the fact that you just came across a few hundred people in your life until today should tell you that you haven't actually found the best set of people for you. It doesn't mean that you just kick everyone to the curb and start afresh. You can if you want to. But we should, as a society or individually, some people should be ambitious enough to build the best tools to find people for all sorts of things, right? Be it friendship, be it business partners, be it science collaboration, be it a creative collaboration, be it a romantic relationship. We just need to be better at this. Well, when I say we, I mean mostly talking about me. Then we've got the fact that we've got to elevate ourselves, right? We've got to expect more of ourselves individually, and because again, this is largely down to the way society is. We are not really incentivized to be great people, or forget about great people, but even kind, good people, right? We can just get away being obnoxious little jerks without many repercussions, without a lot of consequences, right? And people can, again, because everything's just so easy, people can just live out their lives without seeing significant self-growth. And we just as a society needs to put that front and center, right? Because if people don't grow throughout their lives, what are they even doing? So that's something that people can individually work on. That's something that can again improve the quality of relationships. And yeah, employing more compassion in our day-to-day lives, put ourselves on with other people. And yeah, because love matters. Love is, as many sages and CEOs have said, it's the greatest thing about the human experience. It transcends all problems, transcends our own existence, our own lives, right? There's this line from Interstellar where I think Merv, she was talking about how love is well, not Merv, what's the name of that lady who was on the spaceship? I don't remember her name, but Annie. She said that, well, that's not her name in the movie, but she said that she was talking about how love is the one thing that can transcend space and time. Obviously that's not true, it's ridiculous, that's what we want to believe. At the end of the day, love is nothing but just a set of electrochemical reactions happening in our brain, nothing more than that. Right, so let's talk about the tomorrow. Where might we be headed? Let's make some predictions. So based on what we talked about in the last 10 minutes, there are two major paths. So loads of other directions that we could go, but these are two major paths, right? One is the dark dystopian part, where people don't really, people spend, a growing proportion of people spend Wall-E-like lives, right? Everything is catered towards, every need of theirs is catered towards with artificial means. They don't have to expend any energy, there's no growth. The only growth that's happening is in their bellies. Where people use Neuralink-like devices to experience a perfect version of reality in their minds, while their own reality is just falling apart. But because technology has advanced so much, they can extend their lives indefinitely, or maybe even for hundreds of years, if not indefinitely. And in this world, the Neuralink chips are giving them constant simulation of the highest order, the most compelling kind, such that they're just addicted to this fake reality, virtual reality. And more people are in relationships with AI girlfriends, and the populations are dropping like flies, right? Because we need people to copulate and propagate. We want to survive as a species, and thrive as a species, and spread as a species. If you don't do that, our goose is cooked. And few people who are actually having kids are having tons of kids are Elon Musk, so that we may not go the way of the dodos. Another thing that could happen in this world is technology is used to artificially aid our numbers, our baby numbers, be it with technologies like genetic engineering, which creates faster offsprings, artificial wombs, where you can have, because with each, I don't know, the fertilization, you could actually potentially have hundreds of fertilizations if you use all those things. Right, I'm not well acquainted with these things, but there's loads of things that you can do to improve numbers if you are intelligent enough to intervene in the process. Because evolution is extremely inefficient, right? It's insanely inefficient, right? So for example, I don't know how much energy it would cost to create a sperm, but it's not zero, obviously. And the fact that literally 99.99% of the sperm is wasted, or 99.99% of, well, 99.999% of sperm is wasted, 99 point something percent of eggs are wasted, it tells you, and eggs are obviously much more expensive from an energy standpoint, and from a cost standpoint to the woman. So the fact that these things are so wasteful tells us that evolution got things, well, I mean, it had to find ways to do things, right? Evolution's done a remarkable job doing these kinds of things, otherwise I wouldn't be saying these words. But the fact is we can fill in a lot of the gaps, we can optimize our species for those kinds of outcomes, and we can, using technology, we can create tons and tons of babies if we require to, if we need to propagate the species. What this creates then is a rift in society, right? There are people in the house who are having tons of kids, and the have-nots who have selected this suicidal strategy where they're not contributing to the gene pool of the future. And these people are living miserable lives in reality. In their own reality, they're living the perfect lives. And then people who are choosing to live in the real world, they are experiencing the best relationships that are possible with humans, because most people who select this path, they are people of the highest caliber in terms of their propensity for growth, the propensity for learning, the propensity for self-reflection, for all the good things, right? Compassion, intelligence. So it's people of the highest order who tend to match up and pair bond, and people who don't, they just tend to end up living these kinds of desolate lives, at least on the surface. To them, and not seeing that desolate, and it might just seem normalized, right? So that's that. And then the second major path is where society gets its act together, where we prioritize growth individually and collectively, where we change some of the systems, some of the incentives, some of the technologies, we make them human friendly and human aligned, humanity's long-term interests aligned. And where people treat each other with more compassion, more humanity, and they build great relationships. And we as a society create a scaffolding where people can have great relationships, because society in some ways actively hurting the prospects of people building great relationships. And where we raise our individual consciousness, this is going to sound woo-woo, but we raise our individual consciousness to become the best versions of ourselves, because humanity and we deserve it. And where in this scenario, humanity becomes a multi-planetary, multi-galaxy civilization spread out across the cosmos, enjoying the best of the universe, and enjoying the best of itself, and enjoying the best of the people in their lives, and enjoying all of this in a rich tapestry of the real, leading truly meaningful and truly enriching lives, a veritable utopia. So, where does that bring us, right? Apart from all the other paths that might happen, these are the two broad strokes. There are different, obviously these two strokes could diverge into all sorts of different directions, but these are two broad strokes. Where does that bring us? Our civilization is a great filter moment, right? A lot of civilizations might have wrestled with this question, but they might have started, there's this Roman quote by a Roman philosopher, that easy times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. Hard times create strong men, and strong men create good times. And humanity might be in that phase where times have become so easy that we've just become weak, and unless we get our act together rapidly, things don't look too rosy for us. And this is, as I said, could be the great filter moment, right? Where if you don't get things right, especially the big decisions, this could be close to the end of the road in terms of a civilization lifespan, right? Because even if the end of the road is a few hundred years away, that's literally the blink of an eye. So one of those decisions that we do need to get right is how do we build relationships. And it is my sincerest hope that we do get that right, because so much of our existence, or our entire existence, depends on that, right? If you don't get that right, the world that you can see and I can see, it's not the world that we want to live in. But if you do get that right, it creates the platform for building the best world possible. Again, a utopia. And we've got to do our best to, again, raise ourselves and raise society to become its best version. Because it's not like humans can't do it. We've got so much potential in us as individuals, as humans, as a society, as a civilization. We just got to expect more from ourselves. With that cheery thoughts, I'll leave you to mull on that for a moment. I'll see you soon. Thank you for your time. Cheers.